And the winner of the Esports Awards Journalist of the Year for 2017 is, of course, Thorin. We love you, we love you. And in other news, Thorin sweeps the TSM Fans Content Creator Award for the 6th year running. Truly a legend of the industry, said Reginald. I know, man, as well. The banter and the wit and that cheeky little smile. He's just a different kind of guy. I would just like to know his secret. How does he do it? Well, time to get ready for the day. Oh. Come here. Right. This can be our little secret, okay? Keep this between us. What you do is you take your water. You take your Gamer Subs, watermelon ice, 1 scoop. Give it a good shake. And there you go. What do you mean where you get the shit? Gamersubs.gg, code Thorin, 10% off. Keep it under your hat. They need never know. Now, when I say I'm a fan of Astralis, it should go without saying, I don't mean that in the traditional sense that people might use that term. Like, as Richard Lewis has many times pointed out, the word fan, at its root, etymologically, obviously etymology is pretty much a heretical science at this point in time, right? Art form, maybe. Basically goes back to the word fanatic, and aside from the fact that's a shit org, no, basically, obviously it goes back to the idea that people are like zealots about a certain idea. They go way too far. That's why it's not a surprise that you get the worst elements of people when they're fans of certain things. I'm talking about being a fan in the colloquial sense, essentially being an aficionado of something, caring about something, wanting to follow something, liking something more than other things. So when I say that, I don't mean I'm a fan of Astralis in the sentimental sense or for emotional reasons. I just love the guys too much. No, I mean, maybe I have to drink back my motto one time, or whatever. My point is, I'm not literally in love with Device like some of you. Although if you did have to pick someone to be in love with. No, anyway, my point is, though, they're my favourite team in Counter-Strike history. I didn't say CSGO, I didn't say in the last few years, I said Counter-Strike history. They've actually displaced the other teams that I was also a huge aficionado of. In CSGO, there was Very Games 2013, my boy Shoxy. There was Na'Vi in 2010 with Markelov. There was MTW in 2008 with a whole gang of players that were amazing. Hell, I used to even want MTW to beat Na'Vi back in 2010. I thought it actually sucked in a way. It's epic on the side of Na'Vi, who was a team I love to watch, that they were able to win all those tournaments. But the fact that MTW never beat them in a series, like MTW was good enough to. In a sense, they sort of deserved to make the rivalry better. They just couldn't, unfortunately. So this is a team where if we go back with the core, when they were Copenhagen Wolves, yeah, whatever. They had some potential, but, nothing too special about them. When they were Dignitas, still when they had Fetish, they were quite frankly at times disgusted me because they obviously had massive psychological issues and they completely refused to acknowledge any of them. When they got Carrigan, now it got more interesting. They became a special team. Listen, they were underperformers when they were under big pressure at the majors, also at the 250k events, where they didn't win any of the 250k events, even though they could beat any of the same teams if it was a smaller event. When they became Astralis, though, they were very good still, but then they started to fade. They couldn't survive certain player changes until they got Glaive into the team. And the Glaive lineup, late 2016, I think it was October something onwards. First event was ESL Pro League. They were already tons of fun to watch. Then they actually won the major, became number 1 in the world. Device was arguably the best player in the world. Later on, obviously, they had their issues. They would be a semis and a finals team, but wouldn't win necessarily in most of the latter part of 2017. Along comes the Magisk lineup, the best team to ever play Counter-Strike. Again, any version of Counter-Strike. You can put up all the greats in history alongside, and not taking the premise that obviously they're the last in the line and therefore they learn things from them. Just in terms of what they represent to the game and relative to their eras, they're unbelievable. I mean, you could even in terms of just raw dominance contrast them against any team in history. It's unbelievable. You look at the players they've got right now. I mean, I was a fan of some of the past lineups with KGB, an amazing hybrid player. You had Carrigan, one of the best IGLs in the game, and he could actually even AWP as like a third option on certain maps and give you this mad OP map pool as a result. Great mind for the game. This is a guy where, this is a team though, where you look at some of the players that they've even got now. So you have Device, probably the most underrated superstar in history. And I say that despite the fact he's won the most HLTV MVP awards, because right up until he did win those, and even during some of those, people were still hating. People were like, he isn't a superstar. He's not even the best player in Astralis. Like, well, just leave those people to where they are. This guy's proven himself unbelievable. I've written many articles, done many videos on the topic. You don't need to be wax lyrical now. Dupree, a guy who, one of the things I love about Dupree is he's like Batman. This guy wasn't just born with some super duper insane talent. Like, he has good skills. He always had good aim, and he had pretty good, like, nous for the game. But he made himself into a legend. That was through his own hard work, and crucially, it's through his mentality. On a team that used to break down and have trouble on T-side, he used to be the guy who was just running through a brick wall. He didn't give a fuck. He was just willing to go for it. That's one of the reasons he's always been the guy I thought who you saw rage out the most and seem the most upset, because he was putting everything in that fucking game. He had his heart on his sleeve the whole time. Then you have Glaive, the genius in-game leader, one of the most brilliant minds to ever play Counter-Strike. It was obvious that the guy had the potential already in the Western Wolves days back in 2013. Then, when he, after all that time in the wilderness, gets to come back in, he takes over the fucking game like Robert Downey Jr. or something. Imagine what this guy might have done from 2014 to 2016 before he got into the Astralis team. Well, remember, he was just secondary IGLing in Heroic. Imagine what he actually could have done if he'd have just stuck at Tier 1 the whole time and never had any of those issues. But then again, though, maybe it was the time away that meant that when he came back from exile, now he really cherished it. It was a prodigal son type scenario. Maybe that's why now he actually elevated and reached this god tier level. Who can know, right? You have Magisk, who, listen, he's already one of the best players ever to play CS. But in this team, he's just an impossible luxury. I mean, that guy alone will shut down rounds and just win you rounds that had nothing to do with what the tactic was, nothing to do with how the other players played. Just a one-man army in terms of people are coming onto his site. He just take down 3-4 people all by himself. He does it routinely. Then, you look what he does on the T side. Like, he's even starting to learn to potentially be one day maybe himself a great in-game leader. Maybe he's going to be off that coaching tree from Glaive. He's already doing some of it now, but I could see him in the future if Glaive moves on or Glaive retires or something. Maybe Magisk is the next in line to be the next great Danish IGL. Then you got Zipnix. I'll just put it this way. People already have talked so much about Zipnix, what he's done. I've done articles arguing for, against different aspects. What I'll say is this. The thing I've always appreciated about Zipnix right from back in 2014 is that when he plays out a clutch round scenario, he comes as close to consistently perfect game theory play as I have ever seen from anyone. Like, I have seen him lose rounds. Sometimes he didn't even get to the last guy. He was in a 1v3, he killed the first one, and then the other two just got him. And I sometimes just look and I think, you didn't even do anything wrong there. That just wasn't a winnable round, or that guy took a swing, or the guy gambled, or you just missed a shot. Like, it's unbelievable. That's one of the reasons I actually think, personally, the whole clutch minister angle is a bit whack, not least because I'm actually disgusted with the kind of like flex that Astralis, the company, has sort of tried to make to get into bed with certain politicians, where if you know anything about how the world works, that almost certainly implies they're angling for like tax money, or the politician to do some sort of investment or some corrupt sort of thing. Like, the whole thing's a fucking joke. So the reason I don't like the clutch minister one is I've always thought a way better one, I just didn't get the articles out in time, was I wanted him to be dubbed the Counter-Strike computer because of the way he seems to computationally figure out the round. Or since I believe he comes from a place called like Aalborg, I was going to call him the Aalborg android. I thought that was a pretty good angle too. Then you look at the style of the team. Who the fuck couldn't fall in love with the style of this team? Tactical play, a strategic concept of pacing, tackling the strengths of an opponent head on and solving them, breaking them down, reformulating your game to be better, a judo approach, using your own opponent's energy against them with that lurking style, with making space in the right areas, with punishing certain aspects. Even in 2017, they had some amazing play like that. If you go back and you watch, let me think, if you go and watch like the Cash game that they played against SK, I think it was the PGL Krakow one, unbelievable. The way they're just breaking these motherfuckers down. Oh, straight fire. So then you think of this. They were the best possible in their style because of their execution as well. It wasn't just that someone did something brilliant or they just had a nice run of form or the people didn't understand what they were doing. People even knew what they were doing when they were a few months into their prime. And not only would they reinvent it, but they would still just do the same thing and on the same maps like Nuke on T-side. You just couldn't stop them. They had the best possible style to ever play Counter-Strike. It even beats the best player, as you saw when Simple was an unbelievable individual player. There was never anyone as good on Astralis. It even beats the best players, as you saw from those truly great FaZe Clan lineups. Yeah, the FaZe Clan lineups got some of the wins over them. Where are all the trophies for the FaZe Clan guys in comparison to Astralis? Astralis have all their fucking majors in their trophy. Then you look at the career arc. They go from like up-and-comers to chokers to the best team but still have issues to the best team to unbeatable. Like, you couldn't ask for a more perfect career arc. But one thing that actually I find quite underwhelming is it's so sad to see how many of their fans aren't here for any of the above reasons that I just gave. They're here because they like the player's personality. They think Glaive is funny and they like Dupree's silly faces and they think Device is a cutie or whatever the fuck. And it must be Protect. Or because they won all the tournaments and they're little glory supporters. They're like all the little fucking Man U supporters that used to be in my school when I was a little kid, even though I live in the fucking northeast of England. So, I support Man United. Yeah, you just like to win, don't you? You just like to think that you're vicariously part of someone winning, even though you have no connection to the team whatsoever. Or, even worse, because you're just fucking Danish, as though that's just reason enough to like this team no matter what, under any and all circumstances. Now, the reason I find that sad is not because those are totally invalid reasons. You can choose to do that all you want. I'm not fucking stopping you by making a video, you little daft cunt. But my point is, look at the things that these fans have been willing to tolerate and even condone. So how about when Astralis, the company, was launched and the lie that it was player-owned? Now, it was technically players owned a percentage of that, but they knew that by communicating it that way, people would take the assumption, as they did, that players owned 20% each or players owned like 10, 15% each. Knowing that that's how it would be taken. By the way, when you communicate, the intention is to get what you're thinking about and your ideas across to the other person and help them reconstruct it in their mind. If you do that intentionally knowing they'll think the opposite, unless you're just doing it as a joke, which this was a serious endeavor, you are essentially lying. It's like a lie of omission of context when you do that. And you know what you're doing there. It doesn't matter that the words seem right. The intention is the lie in that regard. One of the reasons that disgusts me is because not only was it never the way it was presented, but very quickly I'd heard that some of the players had like sold some of their equity back. And essentially, it was almost, it's a term I've actually only learned from American culture. It's called like stolen valor, which is where you claim to be like a military person or have won a certain award there, but you didn't. So what you've done there is you've stolen someone else's respect and honor, and that's a serious crime. So I consider this an ethical crime. It makes a mockery of what would happen if a real organization came along that was owned and started by the players, and therefore the players had the true input that they would. Because think of some of the problems I'm going to get to in a minute. If this was player-owned, how the fuck do these problems exist? Some of the Astralis players didn't necessarily even want to be in Astralis the last couple of years. Yet, what choice do they have, right? Well, if it was player-owned, they'd have all the choice in the fucking world. Where's their agency? Then you consider the whole Blastralis period in 2019, where I'll do a total video at one point in time explaining loads of details and putting it all together, but I want to do it with like graphics and stuff. So they took the best team ever, in the best run ever, the current number one in the world at the time, and they used that status to leverage against the best TOs in the space, like ESL, like Star Series, etc., who were running the best tournaments, so those tournaments were devalued because there was no Astralis there, and try and push or encourage other teams to come to those shitty little Blast Pro Series, Blast of Ones. It was a bunch of BO1s, a stupid-ass show match that was fucking garbage. Like, seriously, fuck off analysts who thought that was cool. And then do one best of three final and then crown a motherfucker a champion. That's a disgrace. So they did all of that just to blow up their own shitty little tournament while the two companies were still involved within Refresh before they'd split apart. Then there was the whole Neom shit. Now you're going to think, what's that? But they were separate from Blast at the time. No. I'm talking about where they got word, based on what I heard, behind the scenes, that there were teams who'd spoken out, like G2 had publicly on the League of Legends side spoken out. There was a bunch of pressure coming from teams. Obviously, publicly, there was a bunch of pressure from talent. And basically, once Astralis, I heard, got word that they were going to actually, at Blast, kick the Neom sponsorship deal, they just came out as quickly as they could right before then to try and scoop up all the goodwill and sentiment and be like, yeah, we couldn't be a part of this. Like, no, this is wrong or whatever, and make some kind of stance, knowing that it held zero potential risk to them and essentially mocked or stole the valour of someone who actually heroically had have stood up against that when it could have cost you. Could have got you kicked out the league, could have meant you couldn't work with them and still be the same ethical actor, etc. That's the sort of people we're talking about behind this Astralis organisation. How about the same people who the whole time they won the majors and became number one and then got the greatest team ever were trying to constantly in all media stuff take their credit from the players. Be like, I'll take most of that credit from you. I hired a sports psychologist. Oh, I'm the one who pays Sonic's money. Oh, you have a facility and you do proper training and wake up at 9 in the morning. Yeah, they did all those things. The players. Doesn't matter what you provide like that. Take the fucking lineup right now that plays for Copenhagen Flames and you go ahead and give them that whole facility and you sports psychologist and Zonic as a coach and give them all the money in the world and tell them how to play and their contracts and get all the media and have someone come in from the Danish government and you see if you win a fucking major. You see if you can even do anything in this game. I don't think you'd ever even be a top 10 team because organisations don't win championships. Players win championships, but organisations put the support around them, and if they're not manipulative pieces of shit trying to just exploit them. And then, because here's the reason why it's so dirty, guys, is they're not trying to take their fair share of the credit, which they deserve. If you ask me to take all this out of the equation and look what they have done in some regards, they've done some great things for their players. But the point here is they're trying to take the credit from those fucking players. And the reason why is because those players might not be in Astralis forever, but they want the Astralis brand to be at that level so that when those players leave, in the same way as fans look at Man United and they're like, oh, why aren't they better? Like, they should be winning. No, because Alex Ferguson isn't there. The fucking wizard that was doing that magic isn't at that team anymore. So it doesn't matter how much they spend elsewhere. It doesn't matter what they do elsewhere. They're going to have to find another genius before they're going to be at the top again like that. So in the same sense, they want it to be that you keep thinking of the brand the same way, even when the players are gone. You associate what those players represented with the brand. That's what they're trying to do then. Then let's look how they treated their players, shall we? The people who brought them to this point, this success. So they burned them out with outrageous schedules where they already were playing way too fucking much. And they themselves had the gall to talk about these players who burned out in like 2019. Oh, Device can't travel much, to make them go to the Blaster once. But then as the year starts to close out, they make them go on the most insane travel schedule level where, because they're so good, they're always making semis or better, they're just getting burned to an absolute crisp. The players are just begging them, please, we need time off. Like, I need a holiday. I need more than this. But you just had your play break. That was months ago. I've been like thousands of miles, like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 events. Oh, fucking hell. Then you have this fucking idiot, Casper Vid, who joins the team. Well, I heard from other people as an absolute cretin, even for stuff he's done outside of Counter-Strike. And then I've heard some of the ideas he has in Counter-Strike. This guy's a fucking bozo. So this guy comes in, and I've heard his whole shit was like, because I'm the big swinging dick on campus, and I come from sports, you don't even know, you little nerds. And I heard he was working them even harder after they'd already become the greatest team ever. After they were already burned out, making them work even harder. This guy and the team in general refusing those players time off when they've done so much for the org. They've accomplished so all they're asking for is like, get a month or two off, give me some time off, I'll bring a player in, let me play out. No, until those players literally brought along actual doctor's notes saying this guy is medically burned out, you must let him have time off. They weren't even going to consider it. They were just fobbing him off the whole time. They were like, well, you signed on the dotted line, bitch. And why did they do it all right? Was it for some greater ideal because they knew better than the players? No, it was all for the stock price. It was all to try and make money. It was all to try and keep the Astralis name in the public as high as possible by having the best possible players play and therefore keep the stock price going up and keep the shareholders happy. Because that's the only people the Astralis management give a fuck about aside from themselves. Because Mammon is the fucking god, the dark god that the Astralis board worship. So I did a whole video about companies and how they are. Just check it out. Then those same players who did all that for them and are burned to a crisp, they asked them to take a pay cut while they're overworking them, including the Origin players over in League of Legends who already took pay cuts to be able to sign a better player. Then they signed new players to Astralis after asking the players to take the pay cut. They signed Esatag and Yugi. Now, think about this. I made this point in the past, but there's a salary angle here. Either they signed Esatag and Yugi to extremely cheap salary amounts, which means that then when they claim they're proper players, they're exploiting Esatag and Yugi in a piece of shit organisation, or they sign Esatag and Yugi to reasonable salaries similar to the other players, since they're players that are supposed to be part of a real rotation, in which case the Astralis organisation are liars for telling the players that they needed to take a pay cut. Which is it? Why are the greatest players ever paying for you to have extra players in your team? How does that make any sort of sense? How is that reasonable? Then they said that those players were real rotation players, which makes a mockery of what the great players in Astralis accomplished by implying that these players could ever replace them to anywhere close to the same performance. They're trying to sell that idea again. That's the Astralis org that makes great players and great teams, not the players who made the Astralis org great. So, problem with this is, they suggested that these players, they went as far as you could possibly go with credulity here, guys. They suggested these players could play any role, even in game leader, and that they would have up to 10 of them, implying everyone can be replaced. Everyone is disposable and replaceable on Astralis. Every single fucking player. Now, neither player, Esatag or Yugi, had Astralis quality. Esatag got like decent when he was there, but even then he wasn't as great as the other players. Now, this is the same team that historically has kept a level of excellence. They didn't recruit Config. They didn't recruit Valde. Players that are much better than Esatag and Yugi at their peaks. Instead, they bring in these shitters and water down the quality of what it means to be in Astralis. Now, then they say that they will have up to 10 players and it'll be a rotation. They've never had a rotation ever. All they had was burned out players. They brought people in and replaced them. Then they sold off Esatag. They had Bobski in. Bobski played, but then when the real players were coming back, they took Bobski out again. And where the fuck is Bobski? Exactly. One of the most eligible young stars in the game is just sat on the bench watching the others play because they always had a 5-man lineup, the real one, and then they always had a 5-man lineup just to have 5 players in the server to compete at any point in time to keep the stock price where it's going to be and keep it seeming like, and they just flexed the angle because the results weren't that good until the very end, that like the reason we're not succeeding, it doesn't matter, we're trying an innovative approach for the future that's going to build it out and make the Astralis org totally unique, so you don't miss all invest now, right? Now you get in at the low price, it's going to be even higher in the future. That was the implication, right? The dark god Mammon is calling for more sacrifices, isn't he, boys? So then you have all the contradicting statements coming from players and management against different management, players against players, and people on broadcasts and on fucking shows and stuff. They had the same players implying that people like me and Richard, journalists, are liars, lashing out at us as though we're the ones to blame for the shit when we're some of the only fucking people fighting for them and helping them in this scene. Fuck all of those guys at this point in time. Then how about when they just straight up sold Esatag? And by the way, not for megabucks. He got megabucks as his salary, not sold for megabucks though. Sold actually quite reasonably, if you know what their actual amount was. Showing, by the way, that the entire rotation thing was just a fucking lie the whole time. Well, that was a fucking lie, wasn't it? Tyler, the creator. Mate, if you actually wanted a rotation with players who could replace the other Astralis players and were competent and were of Astralis quality, Esatag was starting to look like that might be what he would be. So then if he was, as a result, almost a perfect fit for what's even a very implausible premise of a 6-man rotation, why would you then sell him? You've just got what you claimed you wanted and that the whole year was about and this innovative approach. You would have sold, and by the way, this is even better. If it hadn't have been Esatag sold, they would have sold a different player. And in fact, here's a little gem for you. They would have sold, based on my information, which I've verified, they would have sold the entire Astralis lineup, the real lineup this year, if it had been up to them. As in, they on their end were ready for this, to sell the player, to sell the whole team, to sell different components of it. But what happened was, the other party didn't pull the trigger. This could absolutely have happened. It was well within the realms of possibility. I've even made such hints this year. So that's who the Astralis org are. They don't really give a fuck about these players if they can get the right amount of dollars for them. So after all of that, why do people support Astralis? Well, it's the same reason why ethical capitalism will probably never be a thing with the current mindset that people display, which is they like a product and therefore they don't care how it's made. They don't give a fuck about that. As long as they like the product and how it makes them feel, that's it. That's why they're there. So as long as Astralis keeps winning, and Astralis has device and popular players, and they have some connection to their past, and they're the top Danish team, then they will be supported, because those are the reasons that many of their fans supported them in the first place. And so here I sit, the last real Astralis fan in the world, the only one who actually cares about the things that matter about that team, for that team, in regards to how that team accomplished those great things. And if I'm the last one, so be it. I'm going out I Am Legend style, motherfucker. This video was kindly supported by Pronogo, Mohammed, Alabdul, Razzaq, Dean Tanglis, James Pederson, VatriSam, ErikHillestad, Andreas Kroknes, Hades, Zoomba Gaming, JDubs, Tobias Bernasconi, and Alexander Rao. Special thanks, as always, goes out to Jerky's Minion. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest for one of my upcoming episodes? Maybe you want to ask more of those questions in that video AMA I do each month. Do you want teasers? Find out who the next guests are for my shows. Well, maybe you even want to take part in one of those crazy donated discussions where we go all over the place. If any of these perks appeal to you, or you want to support the channel, put your money where your mouth is and join the Illuminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.